Have you ever experienced opening up to someone about your biggest fear, like abandonment, only to have them turn around and abandon you? It feels like a huge injustice when we open up and we share our greatest vulnerability with someone and they sit there, and this is someone who's told us that they care about us, they rub our back, they give us kisses, they tell us that they understand. But not long from then, they turn around and they leave you. They do the exact same thing to you that you've told them hurt you so much in the past. Or have you ever dated someone who opened up to you about their turbulent relationships of the past? Maybe they have exes they feel gave them the short end of the stick. Maybe they have friends or family members or exes who they feel abandoned them when they needed them most. They talk to you about their trauma. They tell you that what this other person did to them was so wrong. And you are extremely empathetic because you know exactly what this pain feels like. And you give them reassurances and tell them you love them, you care about them, and you'll never do something like that to them, which is what they claim they want, right? And yet in one foul swoop of hypocrisy, they leave you. They morph into the abandoners themselves. It's like this weird phenomenon that we all seem to have gone through, and there's just no way to see it coming. Or is there? Hello friends, my name is Maria, and I've had the opportunity to look back on 20 years of dating avoidant and emotionally unavailable partners, only to realize there was one big sign that I was about to be left holding the bag. But here's the twist. In several of those instances, I was the person waving the exact same red flag they were. And even though it might have been coming from a different, more anxious place, the lonely result was still the same. So if you're ready to learn this common behavior that both anxious and avoidant people share that could be leaving you lonely, then grab a bottle of nail polish and let's talk. I've always known this phenomenon exists where people will open up about like their fear of abandonment and then the relationship implodes. I see viewers talking about it in the comments. I've experienced it myself, but I could never put my finger on it until I heard a man named Patrick Teagan call it. And the moment he said the words, I was like, yes, that is it. It's assuming closeness without enough process. And you see this a lot of times in dating and relationship scenarios where one or maybe even both people have unhealed trauma. Now, a really easy surface level example of a person who has unhealed trauma and utilizes closeness without process is the infamous long-winded person in line at the retail store. And if any of you have ever worked retail, I know you know exactly who I'm talking about. You, as the employee, are checking this customer out, and without knowing anything about you, they look at you and think, well, this young man, this young woman, they have such a warm smile. You know, this is the exact right moment to open up about all of my past trauma. This customer's pain is still so raw on their shoulder that it's ready to go at a moment's notice, and they don't seem to realize it's completely inappropriate timing and there are other people around involved in this situation. Now, as the cashier, you might offer them a warm word, but I'm guessing neither you nor all the other people waiting in line is gonna jump to volunteer to be their best friend. Now, that's an obvious example of someone who has a lot of issues they've never worked through, but somehow when romantic feelings are involved, everything gets a little more muddy. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an example of a common dating scenario that was given to me by a viewer who I will call Ted. Ted had been dating a woman for 4 months when she abruptly went cold on him, and get this, she left him in the dust after love bombing him and begging him never to go cold on her. So I asked Ted, hey, is it safe to assume that this woman has had pretty turbulent relationships, plural, in her past? And Ted came back and was like, yeah, she's never really had a long-term relationship because all the men she was with really messed her up. They abandoned her, they went cold on her, and that was a big reason why she specifically asked Ted never to go cold and leave. This woman knew exactly how crappy it feels to be left hanging, and she did it to Ted anyway. Well, I'm really sorry that that happened to you, Ted, and if you're watching, I want you to know I didn't ask you about her past relationships because I wanted to get to know her better. I just had a feeling that she's had a lot of unhealed trauma, and I say unhealed not because of how she left you in the end, but because of how she led with her pain in the beginning. People who have come through hard things and they've done the work to accept it and heal from it, although their past is still a part of them, they are able to put it behind them. You told me you guys dated for 4 months before she went cold, and I'm guessing she told you about all this past trauma well before the 4-month mark, which is still pretty early. I mean, you guys are still in the beginning process of getting to know each other. So really think about the fact that she's asking you, a man who she is still, in the grand scheme of things, getting to know. She's asking you to make a promise never to leave her. She's taking the burden of never getting hurt and placing that enormous responsibility on the shoulders of a man to whom she has personally promised nothing. Nothing honest anyway. And one big potential red flag is when a person has unhealed trauma and now they're making you responsible for taking it away from them. And I am sure that by 4 months, you had very loving, caring feelings for her. I mean, you told me that you would do anything for her. Well, she doesn't believe you. If the only relationships she has ever experienced have caused her pain, then to her, relationships equal pain. And now every relationship she's ever had leading right up to you has only validated that negative thought process. And Ted, there is a process. I'm not asking you to go into dating and relationships with skepticism and suspicion. Not everyone out there is out to hurt you or wants to hurt other people. So please don't get caught up in this negative echo chamber of all relationships equal pain, because it is not true. But I am suggesting that when you begin dating someone new, you give it a little more oxygen and a little more objective time before you go ahead and make statements like, I will do anything for you. Because unfortunately, even with all of her vulnerable sharing, you still found out in the end that you didn't really know her that well. You know her a lot better now, but I'm guessing she's probably learning new things about herself too. I'll bet there was a time in her life that someone she loved hurt her so badly that she actually uttered the words, I would never do that to someone who loved me. But that's kind of a moot point because she didn't deserve your I'll do anything anyway. And I'll bet if you had just taken things a little more slower, you probably would have found out that she wasn't exactly the safest person to promise your anything to. Because a lot of times in life, trying to build a solid relationship with someone who is still so close to their unhealed pain, it's like trying to build a foundation on sand. At some point, something's going to give. Something's going to collapse. And Ted, I'm worried if you keep getting into these relationships where there's too much assumed closeness without much process, you run the risk of becoming just like her. Because you will get to a point where you start to believe all relationships equal pain. And you can see it with some viewers in my comments. They talk about how they feel like they're the ones becoming the avoidant partner because of all of their crappy, heart-wrenching experiences with unavailable people. So I have a video that's been a bit controversial with my viewers. I'll put the link down below. I'd love to know your opinion on it. I got some pushback because I wouldn't go on a second date with a guy who was clearly assuming closeness with no process. Not only that, but one of the first things he was talking to me about was his evil, narcissistic ex. Now, I'm sure a lot of people thought I was way too hard on this guy. Maybe I didn't give him enough of a chance, and I'd love to know your opinion because all of our boundaries are different. My boundaries are different than your boundaries. And a while back, I made a boundary about maybe not so much moving forward with people who right off the bat begin trashing their exes. And this was after a pattern of dating people who had abandoned me and recognizing they had all showed me signs in the very beginning that they still harbored bitterness towards their ex. And I never had to be Sherlock Holmes. They told me all about it. They led with their pain, and I would go right into empathy mode. Ted, I have had the same experience where I fell in love with a guy after 3 months, and he would go on and on telling me all about how his ex abandoned him and his mom did him wrong. And the way that he acted so wounded over their actions, you would never believe he could turn around and do the same exact thing to me. And I did. Instead of seeing it as a potential red flag, I flew right into empathy mode, and I decided there and then, without much of a process, that no matter what happened in our relationship, I would never abandon him. I would be the one to show him that he deserved better than his crummy exes. You can certainly fall in love with someone after only a couple of months, but it doesn't mean you know them. And when I look back, that was just my attachment triggering me to assume closeness without much of a process, not even realizing that he can turn around and do the same thing to me that he was complaining about. So yeah, you can check out the video, let me know what you think. Not all of our lists of deal breakers and boundaries are going to be exactly the same. But I'll tell you, I finally got a chance to see what assuming closeness without enough process looks like coming from the other side, coming from a place where I was going into a dating scenario with more confidence and less anxiety. And don't get me wrong, I still have a lot of anxious triggers, but I have learned how to use emotional self-control. And once you know how to do that, it will shine more of a light on other people's anxious triggers. And I mean, the kind of anxiety that could be a huge red flag. Anxious, avoidant, unhealed trauma shoots everyone in the foot across the board. It does not matter how hot you are. Well, welcome to the other half, where we know attraction is not just about looks. We also have to take care of the inner half. Because when we share too much heaviness too soon with people that we are only in the beginning process of getting to know, it can make us seem like we might be the sort of person that's gonna try to force a relationship bond way too quickly, like me. Or it can tell people that we are not over what happened with our ex, and what that looks like in real time is, it looks like we just are not over our ex. And that kind of energy does scare secure people away. As anxious people, we can carry a lot of unhealed trauma right on our sleeves because we know what it's like to be abandoned. We keep getting emotionally abandoned. And I'll admit, I used to do this kind of thing all the time. I'd open up about information that was way too personal, way too soon, and just assume that the person I was dating was gonna make space for my trauma. But those guys that I'd only been out with a few times, they never owed that to me. They were just getting to know me. It was me assuming closeness without enough process, and dating is a process of getting to know people. But that doesn't mean it's about dulling yourself down. It's more about not leading with your pain. Lead with the positive. Oh, you like rock wall climbing? I love rock wall climbing. There's a great place downtown. Let's go this weekend. And then while you're there, talk about trips that you would like to take that involve hiking and positive things. And just to clarify, make sure you're talking about your own personal goals. Don't talk like you and this other person are automatically gonna go together just because you've had a couple of good dates. And by all means, please don't tell them about trips you would like to retake because you went once with an ex and your ex completely ruined it. Lead with the positive. And if the person you're with tries to see all the negative in your positives, just pay attention to that. And also, if you say something positive about a trip and they use it as an opportunity to bring up their awful ex and how, yeah, I've been to that place, but man, it was terrible because of my evil ex. You pay attention to that too. Trauma happens to people, and it can happen at any age. So this thought that people don't have as much baggage when they're younger is kind of BS, because a lot of times trauma happens to us when we're very young. I'm just trying to say, it's more about paying attention to the timing. So I'm not talking about never dating anyone with any baggage. It's not realistic. And you know what? Our baggage kind of shapes who we are, and it gives us more of a 3D personality. So I'm not trying to tell you don't ever share interesting or crazy stories about your exes. All I'm asking you to do is pay attention to the nuance of the timing. Because we can admire people, and we can enjoy them, and we can love the heck out of them. But it doesn't mean that we really know them. There's a fantastic quote, and I heard it so long ago. I didn't have a YouTube channel. If I did, I would have written the lady's name down. But she said, the best way to tell that someone has healed their trauma is when you meet them and you begin to get to know them. You would never have guessed what they've been through, because they don't lead with their pain. They lead with the positive. And if you feel the need to get out of a negative echo chamber and change your social circle to friends or romantic partners that have more of a healthier mindset, maybe they're farther along in their healing journey, just look at what they lead with. Speaking of an overhaul, I have to take a moment to celebrate a viewer who decided she had finally had enough of leading with her pain. She was abandoned by a dismissive avoidant, but instead of letting it take her down, she made it her mission to learn self-love and self-respect, and she even said it took something bad to happen to her for her to realize how much good she has to offer in relationships. And personally, I don't think you could have a better outlook than that. She got herself into a great shape. She just bought her new house, and she has a puppy on the way, and I just have to say, girl, you are on fire. Do your best to try not to build connection with complaints. And I'm not talking about this channel, by the way. This is a completely appropriate place to blow off steam. That's definitely something I started doing differently. I just focused on having more fun. And if I was having an issue, I dealt with it, I journaled it, I found communities on YouTube with other commenters that I could talk to, because I knew they knew exactly where I was coming from. Relationships are about intimacy, and you know you have a good relationship when you feel like you can show up as the authentic, genuine version of yourself. Finding other outlets for your pain as you're getting to know the person you're dating, it's just a phase. Trust me, my partner now, if I even break a nail, he's the first person I'm on the phone with to tell him all about my great distress. But in the beginning, he and I had way more of a slower, measured process of getting to know each other. And that's the thing about it. Getting to know other people can be a lifelong journey, but that's okay, because you have your own commitment that you've made to yourself that you won't hurt you. You have your boundaries, and you will honor yourself by showing yourself that you're not going to stay in these dating situations that are emotionally eroding you. And your new partner can talk all they want about how their ex did them dirty, and they value loyalty and honesty and commitment, but you stay vigilant. You say to yourself, you know what? That's great, but words aren't enough this time. I'm going to need more of a process. I'm going to need to see you cactus what you preach. If this video helped you, so will this one. My name is Maria Adriana. You did not have to live my life, but I certainly hope you can learn something from it. As always, thank you for visiting. The other